To unpack the real issues affecting the Tasman nations, this is Trans-Tasman Talk. Jointly produced by the Unshackled.net and rightminds.nz. Now here's Tim Willems in Australia and Dewey DeBoer in New Zealand.
Good evening and welcome to this week's show. The date is Tuesday, the 17th of December 2019. It is 7 p.m. here in Melbourne. We are live on the Unshackled's YouTube channel where you can join in the live discussion and also send through a super chat directly through the live chat. And we are also live on the Tim Willems D-Live channel where you can, instead of sending through government-backed currency, you can send through lemons, which are the platform's cryptocurrency. Unmute your microphone, do I?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm unmuted now. I was just asking what's the rate that those lemons are going for?
I don't know what they're cashed in for, but obviously, if someone's sending me a lemon, it is some form of financial contribution, even though it's not hasn't been officially endorsed by the Reserve Bank of Australia or some other central bank.
Very good. No, that's absolutely the future. I like it. It is 9 p.m. here in Auckland, and we are live on the Right Minds NZ YouTube channel and possibly also live on the BFD, although I couldn't quite get check on that. And we're still just sharing the links around, and I see some people are filtering into the chat already, so that's good to see.
Now, obviously, when we went to air last week, the White Island volcano eruption had occurred the previous day. So since then, there has been a lot more confirmation on the fatalities and injuries. The bodies have now been able to recovered from the island, and it's just a really tragic natural disaster.
It is a very tragic event, and our condolences to the families of all of those affected by this. And there was no warning for it, and there still has been no report that they could have provided adequate warning. Of course, it was an active volcano, and so people should have been aware of the risks there, but it happened so quickly, and they did not see it coming. We weren't fully aware of the number of fatalities last week, and the body count has climbed considerably since they've found located bodies, or a number of people have died in hospital with horrific burns. So the body count now stands at 18. Which is a very high number, especially for a small country like New Zealand.
14 are Australians. There's only
That's
actually
right.
2 fatalities of New Zealand citizens, because it was a cruise ferry that had docked on the island, because it is a popular tourist destination, though I don't think anyone will be going for a joy trip to a active volcano anytime soon. But as we said last week, people forget that New Zealand, it's it's 2 islands, and it's miniature islands. There's a lot of natural disasters that can occur. Obviously, the 2 Christchurch earthquakes back in the early 2010s come to mind.
We're in the ring of fire. We're on the fault line. A lot of earthquakes, volcanoes. Same thing where I am here in Auckland. We have several dozen volcanoes. I believe it's upwards of 50 volcanoes. Thankfully, none of them are active. But New Zealand is a country that consists almost entirely out of volcanoes, and the only active one that we have is White Island. Riapehu, which is right in the center of the North Island, is sometimes active. I believe the last time was in the 80s that erupted, and there were a number of fatalities as well then. So yes, it can be very dangerous, and especially with these volcanoes, there is no warning. But yeah, nearly half of those killed and injured were Australian citizens. So that is, very, very bad for Australia. And you mentioned the tourism side of it. All of the agencies that were running trips to the island have, been shutting down their websites and scrubbing their promotions because nobody will be running tourism, any kind of guided tours or visits to White Island like ever again. Where I suspect I don't see this. This is not something that's going to be reopened.
Yes, because it's an active volcano, and so it could occur at any time. It's not, say, for example, to use a man-made tragedy such as the Christchurch mosque shooting that occurred in March this year. That mosque that was attacked, there's not going to be another person who's going to do that, because that was the act of you'd say reason.
Very unlikely.
Well, it's an act of a human reasoned mind, but they obviously acted very unreasonably. But you get what I mean there. That it was a human
Absolutely.
choice.
Yeah, and so with the and the warning systems, they thought they had warning systems in place here with the island, and they monitor them as well on Riapehu. I was there last year, and we had checked, always check the seismic activity there, the temperature of the lake, and so on. But it can, as you can see, these warning systems are not good enough, and the situation can change, far quick, so rapidly that you get no warning at all.
So the total number of fatalities have been 18, as I mentioned, 14 Australians and 29 injured. That includes 11 Australians, and obviously because it's volcanic ash that came out, those injured are severely burned, and the burns units in New Zealand, they've been to capacity. Some have had to been flown to Australia, and I can't think of any worse type of personal injury than that. I mean, it just hurts when I burn my hand.
No, I on the day I saw a notification from a friend of mine who works at the Waikato Hospital, and she said they were helicoptering people in, already, within hours of the event. So they started shifting people throughout the country, and as you mentioned, overseas as well. So this is not something that we're normally equipped to deal with, but I believe the response from at least those who went to rescue people there were great stories of heroes.
Yes, I saw that as well.
They were on their boat away. They had just left the island, and they saw the eruption. And as soon as they saw the smoke clear, they just turned their boats around and they went straight back to pick people up off the beach and pick people up out of the water. And helicopter pilots who went back several times. So there was great response from people, and hope we most definitely would have reduced the fatality rate as well by doing that. So it's good to see that good human response from people.
Yes, you'll find that after pretty much every natural disaster that there's rarely any acts of sort of selfishness or just looking after yourself. People put their own lives on the line, even though if they've escaped the initial danger, they'll go back to help others.
Absolutely, and that's that's always the wonderful thing to see, is that humanity as a whole may be flawed, innately flawed, but we are all actually we help each other, and we go out and we help other people when we see a need. That need can be fulfilled by other people, and in this case, the police response was questioned, and the police were a bit cautious, and possibly have been criticized in the past for trying to stop people from putting themselves in danger. But this is a clear case where, thankfully the government actually was there a little bit later, and the people were able to get in there and help. And that's usually the case we see. The government is usually not the best response, although in other cases they can be. But people will help each other, and communities will help rally around people, and that's the beautiful part of human freedom.
Well, governments, they always have rules and regulations, policies to avert liability. I mean, the perfect example was, well, I shouldn't say perfect example, but the prime example was the London fire brigade response to that tower that caught
The
fire.
Grenfell Tower.
Yes,
Yeah.
their policy was to stay put in the burning building, even though it was so old that it was just going to burn to the ground, and so that stay put policy was criticised. And certainly humans, when they haven't got anyone to answer to except their own lives, they're going to act a lot more rationally, and I'd say sensibly than if they don't have there's going to be some bureaucratic consequence if they do something which is they think their instinct tells them is right, but the rule book says no.
Yeah, if in the back of the mind you've got that stack of paperwork, that's going to change the way that you behave. Yeah. And we talked last week a little bit about, we had a lot of climate change stories, and we talked a little bit about, or rather, we made some light-hearted remarks about climate change, this not being a climate change event. But there was one journalist from Australia writing for news.com.au. His name was Jamie Seidel.
Yeah, so I'll bring it up. I'll bring it up
bring
here.
up a story, but I'll read out his comment. Melting ice is stressing our planet. Sea levels are shifting. Volcanoes and fault lines are stirring. The Earth's axis is tipping, and on it goes. And so we had said nobody can blame a volcanic eruption on climate change. And in fact, volcanoes spew a huge amount of CO2 into the atmosphere. Yeah. Well, it didn't take very long. It was when it was at the 14th, so it was 3 days ago. Someone did indeed say that climate change or human-induced climate change makes volcanoes erupt. So there you have it.
Yeah, we'll go down further.
The crazy people deliver every single time.
Further down here, it quotes this NASA scientist, Alan Buis, who says, we know that most earthquakes and the volcanoes are a result of immense forces within the Earth. These produce ruptures along complex fault lines in underground rock. And there is a deep conveyor belt like tectonic plates that make up our planet's crust. Finally, we know the statistical distribution of earthquakes is approximately equal across all types of weather conditions. Myth busted. But then this journalist said, but there is a but. And I looked back up at this quote, and there was no but from this Buis guy, unless you misread his name as a but, because it's BUIS. And we had a look at his Twitter bio here. Jamie Seidel, freelance journalist and digital content producer striving to bridge the geek-muggle gap through the plain language. So what, he thinks he's some sort of wizard, and the rest of us who aren't tech savvy are muggles? That's quite snobbish. And yeah, this is... If you see through his Twitter thing, it's full of all this...
So basically there was some woke Twitterati commentator who for some reason writes for news
which is a Murdoch
and same thing with the New Zealand Herald is NZME. And so they feed that, they part of that conglomerate. So there you go. We tried not to predict this last week, but it turns out that somebody did do it, so there you have it. But Jacinda has also been very hard at work making sure that, to offset the volcano emissions. So she's banned plastic fruit stickers, plastic cutlery, cotton buds, and foam meat trays, and probably a whole bunch of other things. So we're going to have to start getting, the cutlery and the cotton buds. If my wife is here watching this, she's going to freak out and say she can't live without those. So we're going to be ordering those off the black market from now on. I think there's going to be a huge black market in plastic cutlery and cotton buds and straws. And I have no idea what they'll replace the foam meat trays with. The takeaway people are not happy. The takeaway joints, the Indian and Chinese takeaway places, they have given some pushback, but it looks like Jacinda will push this through. We're going to get
that sounds like a very racist and culturally insensitive policy. How dare they?
Yeah. it's
Mm.
it's I'm they somebody will pull the race card at some point, but I'm not sure if it'll work this time. I'm not sure if they
Well,
will be
there
high
was
enough up
a
the hierarchy.
yeah, there was an off-duty police officer in Western Australia who tortured to death a wombat. He wasn't charged with animal cruelty because he had Aboriginal ancestry and it was part of his cultural heritage, so he wasn't charged. So there you go.
Yeah, good luck. My chat's saying we can buy some plastic bags
Mm.
off Amazon as well. So they're trying to ban these things, but we'll have to get them. We'll have to get them from.
Yeah.
And you don't buy them from Amazon. Actually, you need to buy them from AliExpress. You get them from China. It's that's where all the good cheap stuff comes from. But one thing I'm
Yeah.
happy.
Fruit
The one.
stickers on that are on apples, for
Yeah.
example. I mean, at least you don't have to peel the
Yes.
stickers off anymore. But what about the poor checkout chicks who they won't, because if like a lot of those apples and oranges look sort of the same.
Exactly. So that's just too bad for the supermarkets. They're going to have to eat that loss. They've got the self checkout anyway, and people just, unless they're double checking those, as far as I know, they lose tons of money through all of those self checkouts because people don't honestly say which fruit they're grabbing. But I am personally very happy with the plastic fruit sticker ban because those things are a pain. I hate those fruit stickers, and they get they're hard to get rid of, and then you accidentally get one in your washing machine and it clogs it up. So here's one I'm happy to give up for the climate to save the planet. I'm happy to save my dishwasher and get rid of these plastic stickers. So there's a small silver lining to all of these bans here, and that's the best good news I can get out of this.
Well, our Prime Minister Scott Morrison, when he addressed the United Nations in New York back when Greta made her infamous "How dare you" speech, he was on the defensive about our government's climate change policies are adequate enough, but he also declared war on plastics and wanted to clean up our oceans of plastic. And there's heaps of horrific stories in our media about animals that are brought out from sea and they have stomachs full of plastic, which is it's yuck. And so, yes, if you put plastic out to sea, you're a scumbag. But I've talked about the bushfires that have been ravaging New South Wales, and last week there was a smoke-induced haze over Sydney, and they're all blaming Scott Morrison's climate policies for the bushfires, even though he can't. If if the world is warming and it's human induced, how is what Scott Morrison's energy policies, how are they supposed to change the Earth's temperature? Well, they've not just made that, but they've also accused him of lacking in leadership, even though emergency response, it's always been the domain of state governments. And so the left on Twitter, they've now got fully fledged ScoMo derangement syndrome. Last week, well, they've called him for a while live from the Shire. I mentioned that they still are putting out that he shat his pants at the Endgame Macca's over 20 years ago, and they had the hashtag last week, not my Prime Minister, and now he's on leave at the moment, and his officers refuse to confirm where he is for security reasons, but the media has found out that he's with his wife and two young daughters holidaying in Hawaii. And well, because he's got a summit in India in January, which is going to be a pretty big deal because India needs to be Australia's new best friend if we're going to become less reliant on China. And his daughters, they're still very young, and so they've just finished school, and so he needs to spend time with them. And so now the hashtag is where the bloody hell are you? Because Scott Morrison was chief of Tourism Australia when they released the Lara Bingle "Where the bloody hell are you" tourism ads. So they're saying, "Where the bloody hell are you, ScoMo?" And so this is the headline from the Daily Mail. Where is Scott Morrison? Fire chiefs turn on PM after he declines to meet them and jets off a holiday while Australia burns. His office refuses to explain where he's gone, and MP claims he's in Hawaii. Yes, it's these group of fire chiefs. They've been demanding a meeting with Scott Morrison. They're led by this former New South Wales Fire and Rescue Commissioner Greg Mullen, and he's one of the founders of the Emergency Leaders for Climate Action, and they're planning a summit, emergency summit about unprecedented bushfires. So if the government isn't going to act, then they're going to hold their, because of course summits have worked out great in Australia. I remember Kevin Rudd's 2020 summit in 2008. I don't think any single idea from that has actually been implemented. And then the New Daily, this is a union super fund backed news website. They've called the link between climate change and our bushfire holocaust. So they've called, even though only 6 people have, well, and of course 6 people dying from the bushfires is a tragedy, but to call the death of 6 people and compare it with 6 million and say, call the death of 6 people a holocaust, I mean, that's disgraceful.
Yeah, that's the climate change crazies. I mentioned them earlier, and they can get in anywhere and everywhere. There's always everything is due to climate change. So, there are no bounds on this. I just, while you were mentioning this, I thought I had seen a story, and I just pulled it up here. The cost to New Zealand for being carbon neutral by 2050, which actually is what Boris Johnson has promised for the UK.
But we should stress it excludes agriculture, doesn't it?
It excludes agriculture for now, some of it anyway. Or rather, it doesn't. I believe the National Party. No, they didn't get the agricultural exclusion in New Zealand, but the National Party has promised they'll add it back in once they win the election. So basically, they screwed over farmers and said, "Hey, if you want to be unscrewed over, then vote for us next year." Scientists. So we're going to be giving up $5 trillion to slow down global warming by 0.004 degrees.
I'll send that cost benefit to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who proposed the Green New Deal over in the United States Congress.
Yeah. Well, this is for New Zealand, so they're going to be costing. It's going to be costing them a whole lot more. I've just checked the data. So the 2050 is going to cost us the $5 trillion by in 100 years. So by 2100. So yeah, that cost is over the next 80 or so years. But that is how much that's basically the price tag of this carbon neutral nonsense. And yeah, there's a reason your former fire chiefs over there are former fire chiefs, probably.
Yes.
And like, okay, well, they're not the ones fighting the fires, and they're sitting around postulating about how this is due to global warming, and the summits in New Zealand, we call them working groups. Our government loves them. They set up working groups for everything, and the point of them is that nothing gets done. That's kind of the point. Is you can just say, oh, yeah, we had a summit or a working group, and we can go and move on to the next thing.
It's interesting that the climate activists they're screaming out for Scott Morrison to show leadership and not leave, but are actually any of them volunteering to fight the fires? If you believe it's emergency, sign up. We have a volunteer rural fire brigade in every state and territory. You can stop it from being a catastrophic fire season. And former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, well, since he's now unemployed, since he lost his seat of Warringah at the federal election, he's got ample time to fight the bushfires in New South Wales, since he's been a volunteer firefighter for many years, and he hasn't made a big deal about it. He's just, because he's always been just the action man. So he's also a volunteer surf lifesaver as well. But of course, they say that Tony Abbott shouldn't get credit for it because his climate policies caused the bushfires.
Yes, well, we've talked about this in the past shows. We don't need to rehash it all, but it is probably the green policies that led to the buildup of dead firewood and the water mismanagement. Probably, all of that stuff was at the local level underway, during his government. But I don't think he could have really seen it coming anyway.
Well, they got rid of him anyway after 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't have much of a chance. But apparently, he destroyed the planet in 2 years. That one I can believe as well. That's something that makes complete sense if climate change causes everything.
Yeah. Now, despite that, in May this year, it was the climate change election, and the Australian people and the people of Queensland overwhelmingly voted to reject Bill Shorten's climate policies, his 50% renewable energy target. There were also a whole bunch of other targets, and of course there was that where he became unstuck is when a rogue mainstream media journalist repeatedly asked him at a press conference, what are the costs to the economy, Mr. Shorten? Jonathan Lee was his name. He got promptly shafted off Bill Shorten's campaign bus. And it turned out that Bill Shorten did have something. Apparently, even though the Australian people, the quiet Australians, didn't want this climate lunacy, the mainstream media have been putting enough pressure on cuckold Liberal politicians, and the main cuck has been the Liberal New South Wales Environment Minister, Matt Keane, who said that, yes, climate change is contributing to these bushfires. And he's been labelled a hero for doing this, stunning and brave. And there's been all these puff pieces about the rise of his career, which is, well, he's a power broker. So I think I should say no more about his rise to prominence. But yes, he certainly got a lot of love from the media, and they've been the media packs. They've been hunting for climate deniers, asking all the federal government ministers, have you ever been a climate denier? Which again, like, ministers, the government, they should just stand up to the media and saying, you report what we say, you don't tell us what to do.
And when the journalists, or especially of the opposite political persuasion to yourself, are telling you that you're a rising star, you should be really worried, right? When your opponents are saying that you're doing great, that's when you've made a really big mistake.
Yeah, it's like all the one mainstream media journalist posted on Twitter, look at all the unified mainstream media outlets for Trump's impeachment. Yes, it certainly does say a lot.
Exactly. Now, but with Scott Morrison, and his government opposing all of the climate change stuff, right? The economy must be in really great shape, Tim, over there in Australia. You must be running, great GDP, great surpluses, and all that stuff.
Well, we've just had MyEFO delivered by the Treasurer Josh Frydenberg and Finance Minister Matthias Cormann, which stands for the Mid-Year Economic and Fiscal Outlook, because the financial year is from July the 1st until June the 30th. And the Morrison government has projected a budget surplus, they did back in May, of $7.1 billion, the first budget surplus in over a decade, because of the weakening economy, sluggish wage growth. The budget surplus has been slashed from 7.1 billion to 5 billion. So it's still a very, I would say, decent surplus. But according to Shadow Treasurer Jim Chalmers, he has said this is a humiliating blow to the Morrison government, because economic growth has been slashed from 2.75 to 2.25%, and the government had no idea to turn things around. Of course, the Labor Party, they were responsible for the Keynesian economic stimulus in 2008, where they gave everyone $900 checks. The South Australian Liberal government, they want the Morrison government to bring forward the next round of tax cuts, and the Reserve Bank, they're continuing to slash interest rates. There's now less than 1%, and want to introduce quantitative easing, which is just code for printing more money. And I'm adherent to Austrian economics,
Yes,
and
no,
that
I'm into Austrian economics as well, so
which
good
means
company.
you can delay the inevitable, but all of this throwing money at it, inflating the economy, it just makes the crash even worse. It's as the expression goes, rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. And
Absolutely, and you can only um, pump up the bubble for a certain amount of time before just like a balloon, it's going to pop, and the more air that you've got inside of it, the louder the bang will be.
Yeah. It's interesting that the left oppose tax cuts, but they're for economic stimulus, which is it's a
It's
government
basically a tax
handing.
cut. It's a handout. It's a tax cut for basically the super rich, right? The people who are the first to get the money, the banker, the banks. It's a subsidy for the banks and the financial industries.
Yes.
Because what the currency gets devalued as well. So the people who don't have very much, or who the money filters down through at the end, which is the working class, they get hit with the inflation. So the people who get the money first and spend it, they're the ones who win.
We're still getting inflation, but wage growth continues to be sluggish, which obviously economics, it's about the rules of demand and supply. And there are certainly not, well, the government's always claimed that we've added hundreds of thousands of new jobs every year, but what is the legal migration intake every year? And I assume those people aren't coming to Australia to just twiddle their thumbs.
No, they're not, and that helps to higher immigration, especially if it's lower skilled. I suppose the skill level even doesn't matter that much, but that's going to depress wages because you're increasing the supply of workers, and then you've got more competition for the jobs, which is going to level out your wage growth. It's simple economics, right? If you're an Austrian, anyway.
Yes, and well, we've known for since Jacinta Ardern's been in office, that she's a big spender, and we played her 2 years in office in 2 minutes on a couple of shows back, which is basically saying we've spent this, we've spent that, and obviously if you're spending a bit more than the Australian government, you're not going to have a surplus.
Yeah, and so 2 years ago, the Labor Party returned to power, and they got a large surplus handed to them by the national government that had run deficits, which they had inherited from Labor, until their last year or second to last year. So they projected surplus still. $1.3 billion is what the projection was, but they're now expected to go into the red with a deficit of $900 million. So we've seen just over $2 billion spent away this year, or rather in the past few months, and a lot of that is because they're actually borrowing $12 billion over the next 5 years to spend on infrastructure. So they're putting together an infrastructure fund to spend on transport, schools, and hospitals, and the regions, as they call it, which is basically the Shane Jones New Zealand First slush fund, where he, tries to get enough votes to be.
He got rushed to hospital, I heard, because of stress.
Yes. I maybe the comment will. So Shane Jones is very well known for his. He's well known for buying pornography on his credit card, his government credit card. So there were some jokes about why he may have been rushed off to hospital.
Yes, I told you about the Iranian asylum seeker, that their penile accident. So is that what everyone's saying about Shane Jones?
That's right. One of those events. Yes, so this goes into where they're spending big as well. It's just borrow if you need to borrow for key infrastructure, that's one thing, because it would they first spent on all of the things that aren't important, and then they've run out of money, and then they can say, we have no money, so we're going to borrow billions of dollars to spend on all the things that we should have been prioritizing in the first place. And so we are seeing, the inevitable effects of a Labor government, which is that they will just spend their way into debt, and then hope that the future generations will eventually pay that off.
Yes, it's the way that it works here in Australia as well. Well, we only had 6 years of Labor from 2007 to 2013, but it's nearly 7 years later, we're still paying for it. And as I mentioned, we're finally back in surplus next year. But yes, and I assume the same would have happened if Jeremy Corbyn had won in the UK. Well,
Yeah.
he was promising a lot more than just to spend, just to
Yeah,
nationalise things. But we'll get to a summary of that at the end of the
yeah.
show.
That's pretty crazy. Thankfully, our Labour Party is Jacinda Ardern actually worked for Tony Blair, so she's thankfully a bit more of a Blairite. Which
Yes.
it's working.
And Helen Clark, she was a social democrat as well. That's why she lasted 9 years as your prime minister.
And that's why Tony Blair lasted for nine, at least. No, was it 9, 10,
Three.
15?
He won three terms.
Yeah. So anyway, clearly that approach seems to work to a certain extent. But what it is that the Corbynistas are promoting would be an absolute disaster, as we've seen in many other countries. So the government here in New Zealand, though, is still going to be sticking to its debt limits of about 20% of GDP. We are at recent lows in terms of our debt and our borrowing, thanks to the national government, which John Key was running a fairly tight ship, at least compared to Labor, for 9 years. Obviously, by absolute standards, he was still just racking up debt and spending money. So it's looking like it's going to go downhill from here for Labor, because once they're running these deficits, once they're trying to spend this money, the interest rates are dropping. They're going to try and stimulate the economy, as they claim, the global markets are slowing and that's why this is happening, and so they're setting themselves up for a failure, which is something that Winston Peters actually said 2 years ago when they took office, and Jacinda Ardern as well. They said something along the lines of capitalism has failed, and prepare for there's going to be a global recession. Something along those lines is what they were predicting. So they were setting themselves up to fail. So we shall see if they get there before the next election.
Even your former National Party Prime Minister in the 90s, Jim Bolger, who his Finance Minister, Ruth Richardson, she drastically cut spending and reduced the power of the unions. He recently said that neoliberalism has failed and we need to give power back to the unions, which...
Yeah. Well, he's now, he's got some kind of setup now where he says those things because they walk these circles and they have these lovely cushy jobs, and he's had a few decades to get more woke, as you might say.
Yeah, Ruth Richardson though, she's as ruthless as ever when it comes to economic reform.
Yes, and there's her economic reforms, for the Australians who aren't aware, was known as Ruthanasia, is what they nicknamed her economic plan.
Her mother of all budgets in 1991 is described as the most brutal budget ever, but her legacy, even though she got dumped after 3 years, is everlasting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and she's one of the people who has had a very big effect on the New Zealand economy, for the decades past and probably still decades to come. And she did again, but she's got a similar issue where the visit of that former failed president of the United States, who didn't quite make it there. I forget her name sometimes.
Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton. She did. She moderated the talk that Hillary Clinton gave in New Zealand. That was Richardson. So she's good friends with Hillary Clinton. Yeah. So
Ruthie,
I'm sorry to ruin that.
down.
I'm sorry. I have. So I didn't mean to ruin your day there. That was really, that was rude of me.
She should always be the Iron Lady of New Zealand.
That's right. Not everybody is perfect, right? So
no.
Anyway, speaking of things breaking down, I believe that some things like light rail never work. Is that a correct statement for me to make?
Well, yes, as I mentioned, we continue to accept 160,000 migrants to Australia every year, and obviously houses are built for those new migrants, but also governments need to build infrastructure for it. And New South Wales, state of New South Wales, has been a construction site for the past 8 years since the O'Farrell Liberal National Government was first elected, and continued under his successor Mike Baird, and then his successor Gladys Berejiklian. And one of the most perplexing infrastructure projects they decided to fund and construct was a light rail down George Street through the Sydney CBD. They got rid of the light rail in Sydney over 50 years ago, but so decided to construct it, get rid of all the parking spaces in George Street. It was
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, it was over time, over budget. They got into a legal dispute with the construction contractor, a Spanish company. They destroyed a lot of small businesses along George Street. It was initially budgeted to be 1.6 billion. It blew out to 2.9 billion. And so it finally opened for the first time on Saturday, and all of those barricades are now finally down, but it broke down on its first day, just hours, and the speed of the light rail is, well, it's nowhere near what they promised yet, because it's gonna take time, because they've been busy training all of these tram drivers, because they haven't had them for since 1961.
Did they bring the old drivers back out of retirement?
They could have imported some from Melbourne, but yes, in Victoria, the Andrews government. This is where a lot of people have been giving him credit. He even though there have been a lot of cost blowouts, he's been getting the infrastructure completed, and he's been making sure that our existing railway lines, they're getting rid of the level crossing so it doesn't interfere with road. Obviously, we've still got our tram network, which isn't going anytime soon, but making sure that cars and railways can't collide. But in New South Wales, they brought it back in the middle of the Sydney CBD.
There's a weird communist infatuation with light rail. I don't understand. We have the same thing in New Zealand here, where they're trying to build light rail from the airport to the CBD in Auckland, down a road called Dominion Road.
Yes, you spoke about this before.
Yeah, and they're still, it has to be cancelled unless they push through like Sydney and destroy the entire road, take up all the, rip out all the parking, destroy all of the local businesses. There's no way they're going to get light rail down there. And nobody who lives there, anybody who looks at this project can tell it's insane. But there seem to be some bureaucrats who are hardcore committed communists who have decided that light rail must be resurrected from the dead. There's old technology is abandoned for a reason.
Well, Daniel Andrews, he's to this day, there's still a lot of anger that he ripped up building the East-West Link freeway in Melbourne, which would have linked the Eastern Freeway to the Western freeways, which link to the airport. But he's instead built the Metro Rail Tunnel, which will connect the Southeast Pakenham Rail line with the Northwest Sunbury line. It'll bypass the city loop and it'll go through a tunnel, which will make sure more trains can go frequently. He has had a bit of a negotiation breakdown with the contractor. Then the machinery stopped boring for a couple of days, but it's back now. But they're adamant, the Andrews government, that it'll be delivered by 2025, even though Daniel Andrews, he's been quite a pushover when it comes to negotiating, whether it be unions or construction contractors. And now he's got the Victoria Police on strike this week, or industrial action. They are still enforcing the law, so if there's a home invasion or a carjacking, they'll come. But they're not issuing speeding fines, and they're alerting motorists to where there are fixed speed cameras in the area, which is great. I think the Victoria Police should go on strike more often, because, well, basically Victoria Police, they've had enough of dealing with the African youth gang crime wave, which has plagued Melbourne the past 2 summers and is in hotspots in Melbourne's outer suburbs, and also, well, the feral Marxist protesters who they've had to deal with for many months. And so they've written things on their police vehicles saying attacked, kicked and spat on for only a 2% pay increase. They're wanting Police Association a 4% increase. So Daniel Andrews, he's not the best negotiator, but he can't keep doling out these pay increases because otherwise we're going to go broke.
It's inevitable that these councils go broke because we're running massive levels of debt in Auckland and Wellington as well, and what they're doing is paying a living wage to all of the council workers. So that's $25 an hour. So that's these people are paid an insane amount of money if they work for these councils. And they keep pushing this up. It's just never enough.
Living wage, does that include, say, are you now entitled to have a salary that's high enough to have a smartphone or a tablet or wireless internet?
That's basically what's all included. It's included in the generic cost of living. So owning a fancy, a nice house, a nice car, all the nice things. That's what they factor in, because it's a pretty decent amount of money. I mean, if you want to live in the most expensive part of Auckland, it's not. But if you want to live anywhere else, that's a good bit of money. Speaking of money and handing out tons of money, we are entering the final week, or have entered the final week of the buyback, as it's called. So the gun confiscation program that Jacinda kicked off after banning all centerfire semi-automatics and a whole bunch of other guns in April is now coming to a close. And if you would open up the link or put it up on the screen. Let's see, I've got one. The police website have a statistics page that shows you just how many have been handed, and people can have a little look at that while I go over these numbers. See that the 43,000 of those, nearly 44,000 of those have come from the buyback. Another 4,000 have simply been handed in for nothing. So they've given a break, and so they've said, okay, cool, we've collected 47 or so thousand firearms, and you can run the numbers on that. Where you're like, well, how many semi-automatics are there in New Zealand? And it's estimated there's around 200,000 to 240,000 semi-automatics in New Zealand. So if we pick the lower number there, 200,000, you compare that to the 47,000, and then you think, that doesn't quite add up, does it? With 3 days to go, that's a lot of firearms that are missing. So at best they're looking at 25%. But it gets a little bit worse if you're looking at those graphics, because you have to exclude the 4,000 that they haven't paid for, and then they've got a price list where they state that only 64% of the firearms bought back were centerfire automatics, because Jacinda's firearms legislations affected anything larger than a 10-round magazine. So people's lever actions, all kinds of people's pump action shotguns, people's 22 caliber rifles that were over 100 years old, that had tube magazines. All of these firearms were affected. So many people just chose to sell those back to the government for a nice price, where they could make a little bit of money off of those. And so only 64% were the centerfire semi-automatics that they claimed that they were banning in the first place. So that brings your number down to, and so I don't have to do math live on the air, I'm just going to read this off here. So that brings you down to about 28,000 centerfire semi-automatics. So that's about 14% of the centerfire semi-automatics that are in New Zealand that have been bought back by the government. So all of the effort they've put into this, and they've paid, the price is on that list. Was on that list that you had up, but I'll get rid of the numbers. 90 million. So they've spent 90 million on this to get back 14% of the semi-automatics, and the worst case, if there's 240,000, it's 12%. So 12 to 14% of of these super dangerous, high capacity assaults, machine rifles, all these words that they like to throw out, have actually been returned by New Zealand citizens. So we talked about the Australian compliance rate in the past, but it was probably only slightly higher at about 20% tops, perhaps even lower as well. So clearly the citizens have largely rejected Jacinda's gun confiscation, and it seems like there's a lot of firearms that got buried in the ground or are stored in people's attics or will be flooding onto the black market, which is the result of the government doing rush legislation, not consulting with people, breaking the trust with firearms owners, and basically virtue signaling as hard as they could, and can have created a very, very costly and dangerous result for New Zealand.
But the important thing is that these guns are illegal now. That's the important thing.
Yeah, but that's going to that's going to help. That's not going to help. Anybody from getting them if they really, really desire, especially if you have.
And also, guns-free zones. They work spectacularly as well, because it would be silly for anyone to bring a gun into a gun-free zone because they know that the sign says gun-free zone.
Obviously, it's not about sanity here, right? Because everybody knows that a gun-free zone doesn't work, and banning these firearms doesn't work. And yet they do it. Why is that? Well, because that's disarmament is part of the plan of controlling people, and it seems like that's something that a lot of people understand, because they're not able to. There's actually a very low compliance rate, and this is much lower than what I was expecting. Coming into this, I thought that there would be actually a very high compliance rate, knowing New Zealand, but clearly. Most people in New Zealand are not very impressed by this and are very, very worried about what could be next.
We've probably got time now to give you a Folau update. We're talking about both Australian rugby player Israel Folau and his New Zealand netballing wife Maria Folau, because it just broke today that Maria Folau, well, she hasn't announced her retirement, but it's been announced on behalf of Netball New Zealand at the age of 32. So they confirmed her retirement in a press release which did not contain any quote from herself. Her service to the sport and dedication to New Zealand is something we are very thankful for, and we wish Maria all the best. That's sort of the when you fire somebody, oh, thanks for your service. Yeah,
that's what it sounds like. Yes, well, there was a lot of pressure.
Yes,
we brought this up at the time where they kept asking her and applying pressure to Netball New Zealand.
Yeah, here we go. Confirmation of Folau's retirement came moments after Taru finalised. I assume that's the coach there. Finalised New Zealand squad for January's Nations Cup, which obviously didn't include her.
Yes, yeah, and that's the way it goes. That's okay. Women's sport is on the way out anyway. They'll be running a team of transgender women. And we'll win the World Cup every single time.
And back in Australia, Israel Folau's legal troubles are not over, because homosexual litigant Gary Burns, the Anti-Discrimination Board of New South Wales had approved or granted leave to hear his complaint against Israel Folau. This is on the Star Observer website, which is Australia's premier LGBT publication. It says, by publishing the statement, in case you forgot, that Folau put on his Instagram, Mr. Folau has portrayed homosexual men and women as people who should be shunned and or avoided on the grounds of homosexuality. I don't think Israel Folau said that. He just said what was in the Bible. And Burns quotes Folau's social media post saying, God says for a man and woman to be together, one man, one woman in the covenant of marriage. They've changed the law and now legalized same-sex marriage. So Gary Burns, he had recently complained that he was facing bankruptcy because he had failed to litigate against a Victorian Katter Australian Party candidate who warned that if we granted homosexual marriage rights, the pedophiles would be granted rights next. Because she was in another jurisdiction, that was eventually thrown out. He has managed to almost bankrupt Bernard Gaynor, who is a former ADF personnel and outspoken Catholic. He's got 8 children. So Bernard Gaynor on Twitter yesterday published all the abusive emails that Gary Burns has sent him. Probably for mentioning Gary Burns' name, I'll probably get my own abusive email from Gary Burns soon. But because he says he hasn't got much money, do you know what he's done? Guess what he's done? Opened up a GoFundMe. So here it is, the Gary Burns Fighting Fund, which has raised $11,700 was created on November 20. So Christians, not surprisingly, doing a mass reporting campaign on this GoFundMe, because of course Israel Folau's initial legal fighting fund for his unfair dismissal case was in GoFundMe until the company decided he breached the terms of service.
Yes. But this is not against the terms because he's suing a Christian, so it's that's completely within the terms. I'm sure you'll see it stay up. The funny thing here is that he's raised $11,000 in what's coming up to a month now.
Yeah.
And Israel Folau raised millions within 3 days, something like that.
Yeah. Anxious Aussie in our chatter says, I've heard from him. Mostly he called me stupid and I told him to go away.
Yeah. It's anyway. But yes, stay away from the weird people. And stay safe.
Yes, and we've got time. It's close to the top of the hour, but we've got time to give a debrief of the UK election result on Friday. The Uncuckables team. Even though the UK went to the polls their time Thursday, the results came in Friday lunchtime Australian time. So David Hiscock from XYZ, Richard Wollstonecroft, the report from Tiger Mountain, and we're joined by Joel Jamal at the end. It was basically the exit poll, by the time the stream started, was basically becoming true, and Labor's vote was significantly down in their working class northern strongholds, and so Boris Johnson, his Conservative Party, won 365 of the 650 seats. Labor just scraped over 203. Liberal Democrats, they got 11, including their Scottish leader Jo Swinson lost her seat to the.
That was amazing.
Yeah,
I cheered so much.
Yes, to Nicola Sturgeon, the Scottish National Party leader and First Minister of Scotland. It was one of the most. How many was it? They 56.
When it was first, it was a good number. It was just over 100, like 120 or so, I believe that one.
We'll look it up.
You can get the exact number, because if you can as well, bring up the map of the UK, because it's just like the map of Trump's victory in terms of by each constituency, because all of the rural areas, the whole country is blue, and you've got these little red dots where some of these urban. All of these urban inner city seats are, and that's where the Labour Party is. They won
48 SNP.
Okay, so it was 4. Okay.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a higher number, but that must have been one of the other seats, because there were some of the other seats as well. Some of these working class seats, Workington Man, the Workington Man kind of.
Pointed out that because it's a sea of blue, the map of England, but of course still Labour's seats, they're concentrated in the cities and in places where universities are. And I
Champagne
noticed,
socialists.
Yes, and I noticed that a lot of the, I would say, were classically liberal commentators who supported the Conservatives have been talking about the diversity of the, what do they call it, Boris's babies, the class of 2019, because there's a lot of millennials who've been elected, some teachers, working class people who are state school educated, a lot of people from non-English backgrounds, and record number of LGBT candidates, including the world's first gay Muslim MP.
Well, I hope he lasts. I really do. I really do.
He shouldn't go to the parliamentary rooftop then, because I'm not sure if you've seen the British House of Cards, but Francis Urquhart in the final scene, spoiler alert, he throws off the journalist Matty Story from the parliamentary rooftop. So.
Almost too soon. That's the way. But yes, I do wish him well.
Yes, so do I. If he's able to live that life he could only do it, of course, in England, live that life safely,
and only then barely still. Yeah. But what this means for New Zealand and for Australia is, a good solid Brexit that leaves the motherland free to make some trade deals with her colonies, because we got the short end of the stick with the UK joining the European Union, and it would be great to have some more markets in the UK, especially to be able to divest a little bit from China. Will be very useful for both of our countries, and so we really do hope for good trade deals with Boris. I think you can trust Scott Morrison to really negotiate that well. I'm a little bit worried that Jacinda doesn't have it in her, but it's possible that Winston Peters is doing some of the negotiation, and he hopefully will do a good job. But all of that hangs on Brexit actually going through, and the type of Brexit.
It will be done now. The Ramonas have basically flown up the done, so they're now saying that the people wanted Brexit done, but we still want the socialist utopia for the UK.
Yeah, it's the cognitive dissonance there is just completely.
But hey, at least they've accepted breakfast now.
At least they've accepted it. But if it was for real, then they could have just pushed for Brexit and won, right? If they wanted their socialist utopia, all they had to do was say, we'll get Brexit done and give you a socialist utopia. Like, why didn't they do this beforehand? They know that it's not true, but they have to tell themselves the lie, so that their world doesn't fall apart. It's quite sad. It's very, very sad to see. Yeah. But what I'm worried about with the Brexit is that we don't get Boris doesn't get a deal that allows him to make trade deals straight away. Like he
led the Tory Brexit campaign, and now he's got this thumping mandate now, so he's in a much stronger position, and basically the EU, they've destroyed two Conservative prime ministers in David Cameron and Theresa May, and now they've got the worst prime minister possibly to deal with. So basically, EU should just suck it up unless you want basically.
The thing is, Brexit, even if they leave, even a hard Brexit, if he walks away from the negotiating table, that's way worse for the European Union.
And he can now repeal
Germany. Germany will fall over, right?
Yeah, and he can repeal that law now, which makes no Brexit illegal now.
That's
he's already also making another Brexit extension illegal now. So he's basically turning the tables on the hung parliament he dealt with before.
Good. I'm really looking forward to. He will. I'm sure he will follow through. He wants to make a good name for himself, and he will get that. He'll get that done. I'm still slightly worried. I want to wait until they can. He could get roped into having a long wait before being able to make deals with other countries. That's what I'm worried about.
But yeah, the only Anglosphere Commonwealth nation that let us down election-wise this year was Canada, where they
Yes.
re-elected he's won the Unshackled's Cuck of the Year award 3 years running, or forever, how long it's been existed. Justin Trudeau. Which you put it down to basically a cuck who was the Conservative Party leader, Andrew Scheer. And you go back 2 years ago when Theresa May was the Prime Minister of the UK. And
she nearly lost.
Hung Parliament, but they've got an actual proper Conservative as their leader.
And this, sadly, is New Zealand's problem, is that we're running Simon Bridges. We're going to be running Simon Bridges into 2020. So, it was nice knowing you, but we're... I really don't see a so-called Conservative win happening in New Zealand unless the new Conservative Party does well. To me, it's we're just going to have to deal with another 3 years of Labour. That's what it's looking like still. But it's a year is a long time in politics.
Yeah, I mean, going back 3 years to the 2016 federal election in Australia, Malcolm Turnbull, he was a soaking wet Liberal. He scraped back with a 1-seat majority, and going into the federal election, the Liberals had lost that majority. It was a hung parliament, so Scott Morrison needed to win seats to retain power, which he did, and he is he's certainly not perfect. I mean, he's still got to fix the Murray-Darling Basin, which has basically turned into, because it's a federal agreement with the states, has turned into a states warfare now with
states'
South
rights.
Yes. South Australia saying no. We want that New South Wales water, and New South Wales is threatening that they're going to tear up the agreement. Victoria is saying, no, it's working out well for us. We don't care, and so it's just a shit show at the moment. So Scott Morrison's got to
the
sort
moral
that.
of the story is that conservatism and especially nationalism throughout the world is rising. Throughout the Anglosphere, the Trumps and the Borises and the Scott Morrisons, they can pull out victories, and all we need here in New Zealand is somebody who will do the same. And all of our poor Canadian brothers, all they need is someone who will do the same. They need a conservative leader with a spine to stand up, and they can win. They can win as well. We can be joining in that winning. But it sadly does not appear that the National Party will get the message.
All right, that brings us to the end of Trans-Tasman Talk, the final show before Christmas, because in 7 days' time, next Tuesday, it's going to be Christmas Eve, where obviously, you've got a large family now, which I have no doubt will keep growing in the years to come. So obviously, family duties for you.
I was going to say I'm of the Scottish Presbyterian persuasion, which, like the English Puritans, don't celebrate Christmas. But there will be plenty of. I've got the in-laws to keep. They. Got to keep everyone happy, right? So I'll be writing a little bit about Christmas, and I hope to at least get an article or two about that out. We've got New Year's. We've got the end of the year up after that, which I think we will still have the end of the year. So we're going to take next week off, and we'll come back on the 31st. If anybody doesn't have, if everyone who's staying up late here in New Zealand can have a little bit of help by watching the New Year special.
I'm sure they will, because if you go to bed before midnight on New Year's Eve, basically you're a grandma or a grandpa.
or a family, a husband and wife with young children, then it often happens that you end up going to bed before midnight as well. But what we've done in the past is just gone to bed and then just woken up before midnight and then gone back to sleep after midnight. Again, that counts in my books.
And New Zealand, they're one of the first nations to celebrate New Year, and it's the Auckland skyscraper that has a spectacular countdown on New Year's Eve.
Well, is it not the Sky Tower? I'm not actually sure.
Yes,
I thought it was Sky Tower, which, very good. I'll be called a Grinch. Well, thank you very much by the chat. I am a little bit of a Christmas Grinch.
But so thank you for this show. We started back in September. This is episode 15, so we've consistently grown our audience, and we've had a good audience tonight. YouTube, well, even before its terms of service update, has been playing tricks with the live stream, but our dedicated fans, they know where to find us.
Yes, and thank you very much for everyone who has watched the show. And you can find more of me on rightminds.nz. You can go to /donate there if you wish to contribute. You can join the Facebook group. We've got a group on MeWe. You can, join in the chat, as those of you who are watching the show do. And yeah, it's just great to have you support us. And we love doing this. It's a great show, and we hope to keep this up next year.
It's going to be a scorcher in Melbourne tomorrow. It's going to be slightly less hot on Thursday, but it's going to be close to, I think, 40 on Friday. So it'll literally be Friday. So luckily we've got air conditioning in the studio here, but as you can see, I'm wearing the low cut. I noticed that it must be hot over there because I can see your chest hair.
Yeah, well, it's
display.
a little bit of both, because I've got the jacket now, and I didn't have the jacket last week. So we've actually had a lot of rain and clouds. So it's a bit muggy, but it's not that hot. So
our audience has discovered that all of us guys who are part of the Australian alt media lineup, we've all got hairy chests.
Yeah, it's almost like not overdoing the soy is actually good for your health.
Well, it's the year is certainly not over for me in terms of my media streams. I'll be back tomorrow night for Wilmsfront at 7 p.m. Melbourne time. My guest will be Christopher Shortis, who was one of the members of the United Patriots Front who was found guilty back in September 2017 of inciting severe ridicule, revulsion or contempt for Muslims under Victoria's Racial and Religious Tolerance Act for his part in participating in the mock beheadings done outside the Bendigo City Council building as part of the United Patriots Front activism against the construction of the Bendigo Mosque, which only broke down this year. Then the next day, on the Thursday morning, that's when Chief Judge of the County Court of Victoria, Peter Kidd, is delivering his judgment on Blair Cottrell's appeal for the same guilty finding and the conviction that he received. Blair and his lawyer John Bolton have appealed on the substantive charge, also that the Racial and Religious Tolerance Act violates the Victorian Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities and violates Australia's constitutional implied freedom of political communication. So that will obviously be a significant judgment. I'm still allowed to mention Blair's name on YouTube, but of course, as I said last week, his name is banned from Facebook. So I'm not sure how I'm going to title the my article on Thursday summarizing the judgment, because I shared recently on Facebook a photo of the fictional patriot activist that is based on him, Blake Farron, on Romper Stomper, which was the Stan limited series. But of course, because they wanted to basically insult Blair, that they made they made Blake Farron, they made him older and fatter, and the younger patriot slept with his wife. So yes, I'm allowed to show an image of Blake Farron on Facebook and mention Blake Farron's name, but not Blair Cottrell.
Wow, yeah, it's not like Facebook is biased or anything like that.
But yes, so that's what will be coming up in the next 2 days. And of course, Thursday night, the Uncockables will be back with its weekly live stream, which of course is not just on the Uncockables YouTube channel, but is also now on a D-Live channel. And we have a very special Christmas present for our dedicated fans of the show. I would say the the new the re-emerged prince of the British nationalist movement, Mark Collett. He will be our special guest for the whole show. Since Tommy Robinson has been caught up with a lot of legal dramas, and there's also been a lot of scrutiny on his other forms of activism. Mark, he came to prominence in the summer of 2002 when Russell Brand and Channel 4 each did a hatchet job on him. Basically calling him a Nazi, and Russell Brand, it was funny at the time, he's like, he wanted to take the moral high ground against this Nazi boy, and it was revealed later at the time that Russell Brand, he was addicted to heroin, alcohol, and sex at the time. So while the time he was proclaiming his moral superiority with Mark, Russell Brand was pretty much being one of the most degenerate people you could possibly be. Looks basically the same. He looks very fit and handsome for his age, and if you've seen Russell Brand recently, he's just a mess.
Mm-hmm.
Russell Brand back in 2002, he basically looked like a woman.
Well, last I've seen from him is he looked a bit like a walking zombie. So
yeah. So Mark Collett
don't
is
do drugs, kids.
Yeah, he has his patriotic weekly review live stream every week. He's very experienced. He knows how to run a political campaign because the British National Party like him or hate him. They got 2 MEPs elected in 2009, so there's certainly a lot to learn from him, and all of us are excited to have the opportunity to chat with him. You're not going to add anything there?
I've got nothing to add to that, sorry.
All right. Of course, you can keep up with the latest news on the unshackled.net. We are going to be doing a membership and donation drive towards the end of the year, so you can sign up for a premium membership at the unshackled.net/membership or directly donate at the unshackled.net/donate, because we want to start 2020. Certainly make it so that in 2020 we can even provide you with better, even higher quality productions. So please, as a Christmas and New Year's present to us, please visit our support the site section. And of course, Steel Detonation by my colleague Steel Archer is back. It has first episode for a number of weeks this morning on its dedicated Detonation channel, and he also has his website steelarcher.com. I have my own show website for Will, and also there'll be new episodes, The Report from Tiger Mountain with Richard Wollstonecroft, coming out soon. And also, I'll just say thank you, Due, for being just a bigger part of this venture as me, because you previously had a Right Minds podcast, but your co-host for that, Jesse, tragically took his own life because of a child custody dispute. But I'm glad that I was able to provide you with the opportunity to make a weekly appearance, and this definitely has been a partnership. We've made
this work every single time, every single show, without any serious technical difficulties. So a really big thank you to you as well, and it's been a great year.
And you've also helped me out with the show notes page, where basically, because obviously got my other show commitments, so you helped me out with that as well. So a Merry Christmas to you, Amy, and your young family, and we'll definitely catch up before New Year. So I won't say Happy New Year yet, because I'll do that later.
So Merry Christmas to you as well, and Merry Christmas to all of the watchers, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
See ya.
Farewell.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Trans-Tasman Talk. To keep up with the latest real news and analysis from the Tasman nations, visit theunshackled.net and rightminds.nz.